So Chelsea unbeaten in 8 matches, PSG unbeaten in 14. This is set up to be a great spectacle, a great match at Stamford Bridge. 1-1 it was in the first leg. Who will go through? Who knows? We're going to talk about here on Let's Talk Tactics. So first and foremost, let's look at PSG's lineup that they had against Chelsea in the previous game. Obviously, the surprise was David Luiz filling in at defensive midfield role. I know he played that position for Chelsea a few times before. Marquinhos was into centre-back and Van der Waal at right-back. But if you looked at their game against Lens at the weekend, in which they comfortably won 4-1, David Luiz was back in centre defence. Thiago Motta, making a return from injury, came into his holding midfielder role. I imagine that is the way they're probably going to line up with the front three of Ibrahimovic, Lavezzi and Cavani. And I want to talk about the way they played together, because what I've seen most notably against Lens is Verratti, who I think could be one of the players to hinder Chelsea in their hopes of going through to the next round. So what is happening for PSG? If you look right here, Zlatan Ibrahimovic is picking the ball up in much deeper areas. He's picking up here specifically against Lens, where he picked up in this area and faded a ball in. Van der Waal was attacking the run. But it's because that Verratti is making these runs in behind, allowing for Ibrahimovic to drop in deep, because then he becomes a problem. And of course, Chelsea are going to understand that Zlatan is a huge threat. But Verratti, I think, can slip underneath the radar, and they need to watch him because he's very tricky. He's a crafty player. I liked him in the World Cup. And what he's doing now is he's looping his runs because he has the stability of Matuidi and Motta being deeper, that he can now pick the ball up in the final third, be more creative in there. And of course, he has guys like Cavani and Ibrahimovic and Lavezzi who are providing these overlapping runs, as well as Van der Waal, who may or may not play. I know that PSG like to put Marquinhos at right back. He might go back in there because Van der Waal defensively sometimes has little lapses in concentration, which I will touch on in terms of Chelsea's way to expose this. But he's good at attacking, and he won a penalty against Lens from his run in behind. And that is where I think Chelsea could concede, is because from wide areas, I spoke about this before, they concede a lot of space. They give too much respect to wide players and allow the ball to go into the box, which is where PSG will be crucial. Zlatan may pick the ball up deep and create space because it uses it as a way to mask what PSG are trying to do, and that's allow for Cavani and Lavezzi to stem in. Happened numerous occasions against Lens. Lavezzi was unlucky not to score, rounding the goalkeeper for the ball to be cleared off the line, because he's making these dynamic runs from wide areas right through the back line, because Ibrahimovic is drawing them out and separating their back line. That is where I think they can be absolutely dangerous against Chelsea. However, Jose Mourinho, being the tactical genius that he is, would definitely understand this and is going to line up his team fully aware of PSG's strengths. So let's look at what Chelsea are going to do to try and play against the French champions. So there's a few question marks for Chelsea. They've had a break since their win against West Ham, and there was a few tactical changes in there to account for Matic being out suspended. Zuma went into defensive midfielder role, which he did very well. But against the French champions, who are very creative and tricky, especially with someone like Verratti going to be playing, I don't imagine that Zuma will play defensive mid. I imagine that Matic will go back in there, and Fabregas might partner him. But I wouldn't be surprised if I seen this exact same midfield partnering of Ramirez and Matic, because Chelsea technically can go through if they have a 0-0 win due to the away goal, 0-0 draw, due to the away goal rule. I imagine that Jose Mourinho has that firmly in his mind. If they get a goal, you better believe they're going to back up into their own half, and they need players like Ramirez in there who's going to work his butt off to close down space and make sure that PSG don't find any seams. So I wouldn't be surprised if Jose Mourinho went out with Matic and Ramirez in there, allowing Fabregas to push higher up with Hazard, Willian and Costa up there. Of course, they have the likes of Cuadrado who could play, but Willian seems to be Jose Mourinho's go-to guy at the moment. So I imagine that they will start with a very similar lineup. And this is what I'm going to talk about in terms of their attacking threat. It may be a blessing that the former Chelsea man, David Luiz, goes back into centre-back, because what David Luiz does very poorly is picks up midfield runners. I think this was a huge problem in the World Cup, because David Luiz gets caught out whether to step to the ball or to concede space. The only goal Lens scored at the weekend was picking the ball up because Van der Waal was caught too high up the field. He's an attacking fullback. If he plays, this will be an area that Hazard can try and expose. Lens picked the ball up here. They dropped it deep and they whipped in an in-swinging cross, very similar to the goal that was scored against PSG in the first leg, in which PSG failed to clear it and Chelsea took full advantage. David Luiz was caught tracking back, did not stick to his runner, and Lens put it into the bottom corner, with the likes of Diego Costa playing right on David Luiz's front foot, which I imagine Costa will do. I know David Luiz comes under a lot of criticism because of his performance against Germany. It still resides firmly in everyone's memory of what happened in that game, and rightly so, because for a world-class centre-back, as he's called, He does give up a lot of free space in terms of runners. He likes to dive in at times. Obviously, Thiago Silva back there will provide that stability of cover in behind him if he does get caught pressing too high. But if Chelsea can find the space in between their midfield and attack in front, and maybe allow for David Luiz to maybe get a little too excited being back in Stamford Bridge and dive in out here, this can provide room in behind for the likes of Willian and Hazard to go forward. If Chelsea get an early goal, believe me, this game is over, because they are experts at shutting games out. This is why they have so many 1-0, 2-1 wins, because Jose Mourinho knows how to close out games, specifically in the Champions League. They will drop it back to maybe a bank of 7 back there, in which Matic will drop deeper with Ramirez. They'll cover all this space. Fabregas will work a little bit. I wouldn't be surprised if Fabregas was taken out later in the game if they conceded, if they were perhaps bringing someone like Cuadrado or Willian to work harder to make sure that PSG don't get a free centimetre on the field. So my prediction for this game, I think if Chelsea get an early goal, I can see it being 1-0. I think it's going to be a close game. My prediction is I'm toying between 0-0 and 1-0, but I think Chelsea will take it 1-0 at home and go through to the next round. I know a lot of people fancy PSG, but I just think Jose Mourinho is a better manager than Laurent Blanc. I think he's going to outsmart Laurent Blanc. Laurent Blanc, it's a hard name to say. But we want to know what you guys think. Leave your comments in the section below. Let us know your thoughts ahead of the Champions League, and keep the conversation going on Twitter at TYT Sports and me at Francis_Maxwell. Don't forget to subscribe.